Greetings. We here at PLD Projects want to make it known that we wholeheartedly support the strikes by both SAG-AFTRA and the WGA against the greedy corporate studio executives. It is a fight for basic human decency. Our reviews, discussions, and critiques are in no way supporting the studios, merely dissecting the art and how these wonderful actors and writers continue to influence us on a daily basis. We thank you. PLD PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
And we are back.
We are back indeed. It has been a little bit. Last time you saw us, we were talking about the certain man in the fedora and the whip and a certain John
Dial of Destiny, if you will.
The Dial of Destiny, yes, but we're on a Dial of Destiny now, but we've moved forward in time. We took a little bit of time off, and we are back, with our original love, horror.
Yeah, I know. I'm shocked it took us this long to get here. Also, bold choice to put the biggest spoiler of the movie like right up front on the thumbnail. You absolute cretin.
Well, let's face it. I mean, if it's 23 years old by now, it's been spoiled in Scream. It's been spoiled. I mean, if you don't know by now, I don't know what to tell you.
I'm just saying, like, that's a bold spoiler out the gate to be like, hey, look at this video about Friday the 13th, where, by the way, we reveal that Jason's not actually the murderer in the original movie. Who is this woman? Oh, by the way, it's Jason's mom.
Well, to be completely fair, it doesn't say she's the killer. It just says she's a woman in the movie. Just like the movie, when she shows up, you don't say.
You have a shot of her with the knife looking like the crazy person.
This day and age, doesn't everybody do that once or twice in their life? Come on.
I just think, spoiling it on Maine like that, it's a questionable choice. Your leadership, I tend to trust you and believe in you, but this is a questionable leadership decision on my part.
Is it enough for you to call a vote of no confidence?
Well, to be fair, we did have people who listened to the podcast who started saying I am running the ship now and calling me the captain. So, I'm not going to say anything, but if they're going to, lead that charge on their own,
Yet I'm still standing. But
actually, you're sitting, motherfucker.
That's actually true. But I'm standing spiritually. If that's the thing.
Standing spiritually? You're the least spiritual religious person I've ever met next to myself.
I'm very spiritual. I have not religious at all. I'm very spiritual.
Your love for John Williams music is not a spiritual second coming.
My love of whiskey, though, those are spirits I can get behind. I'm a very spiritual person.
All right. That kind of spirit, absolutely. I'll give you that.
Fair.
It's a fair spirit to be involved.
Speaking of whiskeys, I feel like we're both a little punch drunk at this point. We both just came back from trips. Yours a very long trip, mine a very short but intense trip.
Yeah.
How was your vacation, my friend?
Oh, dude, it was so nice. I went on like a 9-day road trip up into California, did some hiking and camping, and hit the beach. We were hitting everything. The lady and I decided that we just wanted to get away for a little bit. So we left the last week of July because it's hot as hell right now where we are. And we were like, well, we could go do literally anything else. So packed up the car and took the Prius into California for a little bit. And dude, I had an absolutely wonderful time. I got to go to San Luis Obispo, and I hadn't been there since I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, there's this theater there that I remembered seeing movies at as a kid. And the last movie I saw there was Flubber with Robin Williams. So the only right call was to see another Disney film there. So we saw Haunted Mansion while we were in San Luis Obispo. And the movie was super charming. I really liked it. shameless plug, I created a Substack that I wanted to start writing more because I haven't been doing that as much lately. And I found that I really loved Haunted Mansion in a way that apparently no one else seems to like see the movie. And I wrote a big Substack post about the Haunted Mansions dealing with grief and like kind of the way that the story of the movie is a little different than the ride in what it's saying. I just found the entire thing super fascinating.
Right.
And I would love if you guys go check it out. The movie is great. And also, dude, we ended up in this town called Lone Pine, like the very first night we got into California.
Right.
And Lone Pine is like up on the way to Mammoth and Independence, and it's up near the Sierras. And they have shot so many movies out there. There's a little movie museum.
Oh, cool.
And what's super cool is that like my girl knows that that's the kind of stuff I enjoy, and she surprised me with that because I didn't know any of that was up there. But they shot all of Tremors up there.
Oh,
And
wow. I saw
part
your
of the
pictures.
museum, yeah. So the back part of the museum is got a bunch of like the actual models of the graboids and like a bunch of the miniatures from the movie and stuff that are still there because they shot the entire movie there.
Right. And where you
And
take it
it was,
afterwards.
dude, I trust me, if I could have oceaned 11 to any of that stuff into my Prius, it would have been the first thing I did. But
we see
they
we
had
see the
like,
graboid behind you right now at this point.
yeah, right. Dude, it was wild. Like, it was super cool. They have. I'm gonna be writing an entire article about that area because they shot like Lone Ranger out there, Man of Steel, Iron Man, almost all those like singing cowboy movies with Gene
Mm,
Autry were shot out there. Like, it's honestly kind of this forgotten land of Hollywood legend.
right.
And it's very cool like looking at all these actors and people that were all out there working, and then it's too far away from Hollywood, so they just kind of stopped shooting out there unless it was for like low budgeted B monster flicks, or if you needed a stand-in for the Middle East, they would
Right.
put Tony Stark in front of the mountains where they would blow up everything with the missiles.
Right.
Like,
That,
oh,
but
yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, and then Man of Steel, obviously, the entire desert sequence with Zod and the
right.
army is all out there too. So
Right. Yeah, I saw some of the pictures. I was very excited for you, especially I did see the graboids. And I knew you were in heaven. It just felt like a good trip. I'm glad you got to recharge that way. But we all need that kind of sometimes. I had a
yeah,
quick, intense journey. Met up with some friends and friends of the show, Mike Deacon, AJ Lancaster, and the wife and I went down to see Metallica on Friday. Opening Pantera opened, and Mammoth Van Halen opened, which was great. They're both great shows. Interesting set, like it's a stadium show. They have like the donut stage, which is kind of weird, especially if you're down lower. You have a hard time kind of because there's no background, so focusing on where
yeah,
the band members are is a little weird sometimes. What a great idea they have Metallica playing a show on Friday and Sunday, and it's two completely different set lists, so you don't get any repeats.
right.
It's a great idea. I love the concept. Um, we had a great Airbnb the first night. Dealt with some freaking good pizza. That was actually the name of the
Nice.
restaurant. Freaking good pizza. It was more mediocre, but it's still good. It was good 2 a.m. pizza. Um,
2 a.m.
and
drunk pizza.
absolutely, because there was a lot of drinking. I'm not gonna lie, there was a lot of drinking between us.
Somehow
Surprising,
I'm just shocked by this.
exactly. The next day, instead of being smart and taking a buffer day, we decided to drive up to Tanglewood, Mass. It was about hour 45, 2 hours up to see the living legend John Williams, and that was like an emotional, cathartic experience for me. Just seeing him in concert was just phenomenal. He got to do Duel of Fates. He did. Of course, he did Helena's theme from Indy 5. He did Adventures of Mutt from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. He did.
I love that. That's so
He did
cool.
all sorts of things. Then, like, he had like 3 or 4 encores. One he just kind of quickly turned and went E.T. to land to E.T. Of course, closed out the Imperial March, which was a fine finale and a wonderful finale. So I was really, really grateful to get a chance to see him. Although my body was like, oh, God, you need a rest day. Oh, no. Back to Metallica on Sunday. Luckily, we didn't care about the opening acts this time. It was like Five Finger Death Punch, and I don't even know that like Ice Nine Kills or Nine Eyes Kills. I'm old, so I don't know.
Ice Nine Kills, yeah.
That's it. Ice Nine Kills. I didn't really care either way about seeing them. So Buffalo Wild Wings was right outside our new hotel. We went there, had wings and drinks and everything else, and meandered over. for Metallica's second show, which was again phenomenal. And then I just drove back yesterday, so I'm still kind of in rest and like recovery mode before I go back to work tonight. But it was a lot of fun seeing Mike and AJ. A lot of fun having those drinks and having some great music. Great music. So.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I mean, you and I FaceTimed actually for a little bit through some of it too, which was very cool because I hadn't seen any of them in a little bit. And I got to talk to Kim. I hadn't talked to Kim in a while, so that was fun. Like, it looked like you were having as much fun as I was having. Dude, I went hiking. I hiked up 11,000 feet into the Sierras. Yeah, I hadn't done anything like that in a long time. And girlfriend is huge on doing stuff like that. She's actually hiked the PCT. She is very cool. She is almost cooler than she's way cooler than I am. Not almost. What am I talking about? She's way cooler than I am. But the point is like she's like done all the PCT and stuff, and she loves that sort of thing. And we had been talking about it for a bit. And I grew up camping and hiking and loving doing stuff like that, but I just haven't done it in a long damn time. And we got out there, and I was having the best time. It was funny because we started going, and I was kind of leading at one point, and she was like, "You are going so much faster than I anticipated, and also you might want to slow down because we're really high up." And I was like, "Oh, you're right. I might actually forget that breathing is harder up here."
Yes. I remember those days. I'm not doing that anytime recently. I'll tell you that much. But
I mean, look, man, when you come out to visit, we could go out. There's some places we could go, like on the hiking trails.
I'll sit in the bottom of the beer and I'll wait for you to come back.
Hey man, we took beers up with us. If you saw any of my pictures, we took beer everywhere with us. So anywhere we'd hike, there was pictures of us with beer. Anywhere we would drive in Yosemite, pictures of us with beer. It was great.
That is
so I could respect that. I could also put you on my back and carry you, Yoda style.
Yeah, you can do that. That I'll do that. That's fine. Either Yoda or Frodo or Sam and Frodo. We could do one of those. It's fine. We'll work it out.
Yeah, that's true. I like the way that you're embracing it, dude. Let me tell you too. I had never been to Yosemite. My God, what a gorgeous fucking area.
Nice. I've heard glorious things. So
I'm so jealous you got to see Metallica. I've never seen them live.
Oh no, I hadn't seen them in over 20 years. I saw them at Woodstock '99. That was the last time I got a chance to see them. I've always wanted to go see them, but they were always performing around times I couldn't go or days I couldn't go. So I missed out on it, unfortunately. I've been doing a lot of music this summer. Metallica this week. This Friday, I'm going to see Extreme in Living Color perform in Connecticut. Which would be a fun show from what I've seen. And in October, of course, I'm seeing Queen and Adam Lambert right before I come and see you.
I know, which I'm super excited about. I can't wait for you to make your way out here. That'll be fun.
That's going to be fun. We're actually going to probably do a live podcast that week, which would be not live, but like a in-person podcast. It's like we didn't get a chance to do it before. Might as well do it at least once in our life, right?
Yeah. It'll be a different experience for sure. Because I mean, not that you and I obviously haven't hung out all the time in the past, and we know each other. But it is just funny. We've never actually podcasted even once together. It's always been the virtual conference version. Yeah,
absolutely.
As long as I can remember that I have known you, anytime we've hung out like this, it's always been the virtual podcast version.
Yeah, 100%. Because we're too drunk otherwise, which might be a problem when we get there. But that's okay. We'll work it out. We'll make sure it works.
I've always wondered if in the future, assuming that people still find our shtick not tired in the future and people listening to us, what would happen if we did live podcast shows in the way that certain people do? And I keep having this feeling I don't know if I could do it because I feel like we would just be hanging out and drinking and I don't know if it would be coherent.
It's funny you mentioned that because it's kind of fun to read. I mentioned this before we went live or before we started recording. I've been listening to a lot of Gorley and Rust again recently, who I love. I love Gorley and Rust. They do great.
Oh yeah, they're the best.
I'm gonna plug them if you love horror like we do. They do some great podcasts. But we kind of have a similar opening in terms of it takes us a long time before we cut to the chase. so to speak. Is kind of like some of our listeners have told us they actually love our pregame banter, so to speak. But I always found it amusing, and they did the same. They Gorilla did the same thing. But I always thought we overdid them. We like took them, we just took it and went to the next level. Until I listened to the American Werewolf in London episode, and PJ, we have a new milestone to beat. They went 90 minutes before even starting talking about American Werewolf in London. It was a nearly 4-hour podcast. It went 90 minutes. And even then, it was kind of like touch and go. I'm like, wow. I mean, you had like a little name drop here and there once or twice. I don't even think we mentioned Friday the 13th yet. We said horror, but we didn't say Friday the 13th yet. That's the first time we've heard it on this thing 15 minutes in.
Yeah, but to be fair, I also ribbed you for... No, I think I brought it up because I said I ribbed you for
spoiling it. That's true. The thumbnail. That's right. Okay. Fair enough.
So I addressed it up top. I want it noted. I did address it up top before I totally derailed the rest of the proceedings.
Fair enough. So it was 90 minutes. I actually notated it too. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even look. I was enjoying myself so much. I didn't look at the time. But they actually brought up and said it's been about an hour and a half now, so we should probably get into it. Like that is our new goal. It won't be today. It won't be today because I don't want to announce it and then do it. We'll sneak it in somehow. Eventually, we have like a 4-hour episode, and the first like hour 45 will be have nothing to do with the film we're talking about.
Dude, I mean, could you imagine if we did that?
That might be the in-person episode, actually.
Honestly, it probably will be because then it'll be all the things that we've been doing to that point too.
Absolutely.
Which will be okay. I have to call you out though on the like a sort of very funny, but also fuck you sort of thing.
Oh boy!
How dare you FaceTime me betting people that because I was texting you about Doctor Who that I was at home stoned watching Doctor Who late at night.
Let me ask you one question.
What?
Was I right?
Don't change the fucking subject. How dare you bet using my just because I tend to watch Doctor Who while I'm stoned and I text you does not mean that I'm always doing that. Just most of the time.
It was a good bet. I had good odds. Let's put it that way.
Well, dude, okay, so did you see my Instagram? I mean, I sent it to you too.
Send the video to me first.
So yeah. I've had that Doctor Who Lego set that they built like as a limited edition with Capaldi, Matt Smith, and Clara. I've had that thing sitting for so long because I kept going back and forth on if I ever actually wanted to open it and build it. So then I was just sitting there and I was watching the end of season 5 and I was all, you know what, man? I'm doing it. I'm finally opening this thing and I'm sitting here and I'm building it. And that TARDIS set is the coolest. I had the best time. Yeah.
It is very sweet. I was highly jealous of it. Kim loved it as well. So I think she's going to make me get Legos. Even though I don't usually get Legos, she'll probably want to get it for herself. Yeah, it's fucking cool. I'm not going to lie. But I have to wait. The kitten will destroy it in 2 seconds, I feel like. So I'm going to have to wait.
That's part of why I didn't do it because for a while, Stitch was like, when he was around, he was big on sitting in Lego boxes and knocking Lego sets over. Buddy and Vic don't do that, but like Stitch was kind of like a hellion when it came around to being around Legos,
right?
And like Lego sets. So I never did that too frequently with him around. But now, unfortunately, with him out of the way, I can do them more.
Right.
But at the same time, I was just happy to do it while watching Doctor Who, and I'm like halfway through season 6 now again because I'm doing a little bit of a ramp up rewatch going into the 60th. I really love season 5. I know I've talked about that a bunch. Season 5 is just the best. I think it's the best season of New Who, pretty consistently across the board. I don't think there's a bad episode in that bunch, which is amazing. I love the story stuff. I forgot how much I liked the beginning of season 5 though, or season 6 though. The first half of that season is really awesome.
I'm a big fan of pretty much 4, 5, 6. Completely 7. A little bit of 7 as well, actually. But yeah,
I like most of 7. Yeah. I think my biggest problem with 5 and 6 came from the split. I always disliked that they split the seasons in half. I know that they were doing it as a production constraint thing, but I felt like it did hinder at least season 6 in particular. Like season 7, it was kind of fine because they did everything as more one-offy, which was good. But I did
Agreed.
miss kind of the overarching story stuff that they were doing in season 5 and 6.
No,
So
I agree. I agree with that. That's why. I mean, I think 6 kind of had that issue because they didn't know how to really do it properly. Season 7, they kind of knew it was coming and they could do it the way they wanted to do
yeah,
it. But yeah, I agree. It also kind of had a little more like the first part of season 7 like had some good stuff, but it was kind of like for example, spoiler alert: the Angels Take Manhattan kind of feels like it
oh
comes
my
out of
god, dude, the
it's
best.
great. It's a great episode, but kind of comes out of nowhere in a way too. Like in terms of that's what the feel you mean as far as being kind of like episodic, boom, boom. It's like oh
Dude,
shit, okay.
actually, what's interesting, I was just reading something about this. I have to see if or maybe I watched a video about it, but I'll have to try to find it and send it to you. But there's a theory that's going around that I'm gonna kind of pay attention to it, but it was really interesting with the way that it was a video because they broke it down and they were showing the scenes. But they think that season 7 is actually told out of order from the Doctor's perspective, and so that the Angels Take Manhattan there's what I think it's the 3rd or 4th episode in the season before it happens. There's like this really strong scene between Amy and the Doctor where the Doctor seems really upset and really sad, and we don't
Hmm.
really get an understanding of why. And it's actually because he is going back and seeing them after he knows what happens.
Oh, okay. That's Power of
So
Three, maybe or
yeah, I think it's the
okay.
power of 3 that they were talking about. But the theory essentially is that the season's told out of order from the Doctor's perspective, and part of why that is that once the Angels Take Manhattan happens, he has to see them again
Right,
before he can let go.
which makes a lot of sense to be completely honest with you.
Yeah,
But then again, he doesn't
100%.
let go. Then again, he doesn't really let go unless you're talking that the episodes take place like after the Snowman episode, which introduces Clara, because he's retired up to his little cloud up there for a while. So
Right.
maybe it
Which
takes
is
place
probably
after
why he does it,
that. Maybe, yeah.
because because the power of 3 is not really an adventure episode.
No, it's very much its own thing. So
Right.
okay,
So
that's
I'll see
fair.
if I can find that. But I've
Yeah,
been deep in the Doctor Who rabbit hole, as it were, because we're getting closer and closer to the 60th. And boy, dude, let me tell you, those 60th anniversary audio dramas so far that Big Finish has
yeah,
been doing.
spot on.
Oh my god.
Very
We're
good.
spoiled.
Very fun. We are spoiled. Absolutely spoiled. And I finally listened to. That's right. I don't know. I should have notated it down the first day. I actually finally listened to a Big Finish audio drama, and it's like the 60th anniversary spurred me to. I'm like, okay, this is a new story I can jump right into. Let's fucking do it. And I loved it. I haven't gone
Yeah.
back yet. I'll probably wait till after the 60th episodes are done. Then maybe I'll go revisit some of the other ones to really kind of sink my teeth into. But I'm happy with what I got so far. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. I've re-listened to all 3 of them so far at least twice, and we still have 5 more. And I'm starting to have theories on you and I talked about. So, nerd moment for all of you. Let me set up the table. The 60th anniversary Big Finish is doing involves us getting thrown into a situation where a weapon has been used against the Doctor. We don't know which Doctor. And the Doctor is degenerating and like fluctuating through the different faces. So every episode is one of the Doctors as like the degeneration keeps happening and there's no stability. So it's one of the original actors throughout doing this thing, and it's one big story. I originally thought, because it begins clearly in the Time War with everything going on, and you and I had talked about this, it's very clearly, I was like, oh, it must have been 8 where it happens.
Right.
That is so clearly wrong. And now in hindsight, and the further into this we go, I'm really wondering where it happens,
Yeah.
because now that we also know that Jackie is in one of them
Yep.
and things like that, I'm like, wait, then what is going on? And we know that Tennant is in one of them and Missy is in one of them. Like,
Tennant and Missy
I'm
together is
curious.
a fun time.
Yeah, the fact that Missy and Tennant are going to be together is awesome.
Yeah, I like that. I like that quite a bit. So.
But I'm very curious where we're going to find out where the Doctor got like hit in the timeline.
Yeah, I'm very curious too, because that's the one thing that's been confusing. I was like, I wasn't sure if it was just me. And I talked to you back, like, oh, I have no idea either. I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm on board the same way you are. Okay, cool.
No, yeah. Honestly, the only reason I assumed it was 8 was because so many of the audio dramas with 8 have at this point been in the Time War, because like they've done 5 sets of Time War stories so far with him, and like 5 is definitely rushed up on it. Obviously, we know 10 directly deals with it again in his TV series. Like, I guess I keep forgetting that other doctors really would have run into the Time War in some capacity, or at least brushed up on it. But 8 and 10 were the two that seemed like that's kind of where it always was. Like they were the ones that dealt with it the most.
Right.
But I'd be curious if like what if like this is blue sky dreaming? There's no way this is what it is, but God, could you imagine if it turned out Capaldi was brought on to Big Finish and we didn't know, and like the reveal is that he was the doctor that it had happened to, and this is where it starts?
Oh, I'd be so good, because I miss Capaldi so much. So give me my Peter, give me my grumpy guitar swinger.
And speaking of, I was going to say I've been seeing a lot of people giving him love because it was 10 years ago he was announced as the Doctor, and the people have been talking about it over the timeline recently, just how much they really liked him as the Doctor. And I was like, oh, PLD would be so happy if he was sober and reading these.
I should go back and read them because I do love it. I know. Even drunk because I would have loved it, but I probably just forgotten about it. But yeah, I'm a big Capaldi guy, so give it to me. That's right. The 6th anniversary, of course, is coming in November, and we get 3 episodes on air as well. Not just a Big Finish. We actually get 3 fully realized episodes with David Tennant, with Russell T Davies. Can't wait for that. And the Christmas special with Nika Degadwa. So that should be a lot of cool.
Dude, I can't wait for this 60th. Like, I need to be November because I really just can't wait to see what they have done here, especially with the Shooty of it all, because we know Shooty is also in it. Like, I just need answers. I can't wait. I'm so excited, and I think
not too far away. Not too far.
I think Tennant being back is a good thing, at least out the gate, because I think the show needed. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say I think the show needed a nice reset, and I also think that it really needed someone who really championed the franchise and cared about it to come back to try to get it back to its former glory. And both Davies and Tennant are so clearly those guys.
Right.
And to bring them back to the fold, to allow Russell T Davies to usher in a new era, especially coming off of a very stupidly controversial run under Jodie Whittaker. And I mean stupidly controversial in the way that I don't even love most of her run because I don't think the writing's that great, but she's fantastic. But the controversy around her being the Doctor and all that bullshit that was so exhausting, when it was like, I'm totally here with you if you don't like Chris Chibnall as the showrunner of Doctor Who. It's fine. Like, I get it. Yeah, like I don't care about that. No. But coming off of all the drama and all of that, it's good to have one last kind of hurrah for Tennant, because I think at this point, this will probably be the last time we see him in live action.
I think so too. That's what he's kind of hinted at, saying with one last go, because he feels like he's getting too old to do it. Which I guess it makes sense. I mean, granted, we have Tom Baker as the curator, so never say never. But I agree that this is probably the last time you'll see him, especially as 10.
Right. Or 14.
Or 14, I should say too. Yeah. I can say that too. Sorry.
Yeah. No. I just, because Davies has been very specific of, he's like, this is not 10, this is 14. Yeah. So I but I do think we're both right. I think this is the last time in live action we'll see him. I do not think he will give up playing the role in the audios though, because why would he? I mean, look at to your point, Tom Baker is still playing the Doctor in audio dramas, and he's almost 90.
Yeah, so that works for me. Works for Make-A Billion. It works for him as well. So he loves the show and he loves the character. So why would he give it up? No reason to.
I mean, I don't want him to for any reason, obviously, because why would I?
So my big question here is: are we doing 2 mediocre white dudes on film? Or are we doing 2 mediocre white idiots in a box like we usually the Doctor Who show we want to do? It feels like we're doing.
I mean, are you really that mad about it? Are you?
No. I'm just stating a fact. Just trying to maybe draw us back in. That we haven't touched our Friday the 13th yet, and we should probably start getting at least in that general direction, because we could talk about Doctor Who for a long long time.
Well, here's the thing. We could also talk about Friday the 13th as a whole for a long time. So I guess let's get those two mediocre white idiots into a blue box so we can go back to 1980.
There you
Look
go.
at that. Look at this segue here. So we're going to take the TARDIS back to 1980.
Right.
You know,
actually, to
right
be honest,
in the middle of.
Take it back a little bit before that.
I was going to say, you want to go back to 1978? Are we going back to 1978?
I think go back to 1972.
You're going to go back to 1972. Look at you.
And Sean Cunningham, producer, director, writer, Sean Cunningham, working with Wes Craven on The Last House on the Left.
Okay.
Which inspired a certain 1978 film by John Carpenter.
John Carpenter's Halloween, starring the now Oscar-winning Jamie Lee Curtis.
Our Oscar winner, Jamie Lee Curtis. That's right. And which, in fact, in turn, inspired Sean S. Cunningham to go to his producers and say, or go to his co-workers and say, we're going to rip that off.
Yes, correct.
Point blank, we're going to rip this off. It made money.
Yeah, and you know what? The slasher genre was finding its way again. The horror genre, as we talked about in 1978, the horror genre finally reaches suburbia. Halloween is a huge hit. Like, people forget. Horror movies were still playing in gritty drive-in type theaters and dive theaters and cities. Like, horror genre, unless you were like The Exorcist, you probably were not playing in middle-class suburbia.
Right.
But suddenly, out of nowhere, Michael Myers and that fateful Halloween night becomes this cultural turning point. Turning point that we never came back from in a very interesting way. Like, that night that he came home, horror came home with him. And with that, the slasher boom of the 80s is born.
And how so? And it's funny to know the Friday the 13th has become such an overall successful franchise. 12 films, still going. We actually have stuff working on this day. We have TV series coming. They're still working on rights to do films, I think, at this point. I don't know if that's all been completely settled about films. But either way, there's more coming from this universe. And what an ignominious beginning. I don't mean that. I'm trying to mean that negatively. But like, we tend to have a rose-eyed perspective, rose-colored glasses, eyes perspective when this began. I mean, this is like not a really hardworking horror film, kind of like, this is like not mentally, this is not like this is a ripoff, tried and true. Sean Cunningham had a title. He pitched the title in Variety magazine without having a script written. Just, he knew the title of Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
That's it. And like, oh, that sounds like a cool title. And he had Halloween in the background. So then he's like, we're going to write this down. So like, this was all done so on the cheap, so haphazardly. It's amazing what it really ended up predicting or being the basis for going forward.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, for a movie that was made just to basically ride the coattails of Halloween, it's really fascinating that this movie ended up also being its own landmark type of thing, not just for the fact that it launches a franchise, but it also ultimately, this is arguably one of the most famous twists in all of film horror history as far as anything is concerned. This is a movie that kind of really changed the dynamic of the slasher genre almost 2 years in. And the funny thing is because of that, then when Halloween 2 comes out in 1981, they are trying to copy Friday the 13th because Friday the 13th is more violent. It's more bloody. So when they do Halloween, the initial version of Halloween 2 is shot and it's not gory enough. It's not violent enough. So they actually go back to make it more violent because they want to try to chase what they're doing.
Absolutely. And even though Carpenter didn't want to do that, that's one of the reasons why Halloween 2 was so lackluster from Carpenter's perspective. It's interesting enough. I was like, look at this. The budget for this film, $550,000. That's it. The box office, $59.8 million. Horror to this day, horror sells because you can make horror mostly cheaply. And there's always an audience for it. I would challenge you to argue anybody else out there. Is there any other genre that is so consistently like just draws without like IP even necessarily? You put a horror film out there, people are like, it's a horror film. I'll go see it. Last House on I'll go see it. Megan, talk to me. All these movies are coming out that with no IP and they're successful because you can make them on the cheap. They make a budget or they make a profit and you can just rinse and repeat. And sometimes you hit gold and it can have 12 or 13 of them.
100%. And I think that's part of what always drew me to the genre as a whole. It's why I keep coming back to it, because in that way, the thing I also love about horror is it continues to challenge you with these lower budgets and things like that and trying to do different things. Like, I saw someone talking about it the other day and they were like, man, I'm so tired of horror movies dealing with grief. And I was like, no, don't say that. Like, don't be mad about that. Let these people use horror as a background for grief. Like, that, what a silly thing to say. You don't have to like every movie that deals with it, but I think that horror movies inherently allow that sort of thing, and there's just such a creative outlet to it, and that's why they're so good. And then you do them kind of cheaply, because ultimately at the end of the day with a lot of these horror movies, is the killer really the scary monster, or is it the people around him? Is it et cetera, et cetera?
And it might be both, to be honest with you.
Right. Exactly. So with all of that, here we are in 1980. We are thrown into this horror film that is chasing the Halloween success, because they know that, like everyone else, you have to chase the money, right? And so that's exactly what they did. And this is released in May of 1980. Nice. Friday the 13th, with number one, the tagline on the poster, like, what a great way to sell it was, they were warned, they are doomed. And on Friday the 13th, nothing will save them. Like, this just creepy vibe of it all. But it does also chase that Halloween vibe of, like, the silhouette, the knife. Mm-hmm. Like, they are straight up chasing it, but basically being like, but this time Halloween is set in the woods.
Right. Absolutely. Another one of those great taglines they had from the original Variety poster. Most terrifying film ever made, even though it wasn't even written yet. I love marketing like that. It's like, well, you're setting yourself up for a high bar there, my friends. But
100%.
Agreed. Like, I mean, you really took it and ran with the Halloween aspect of it. It knew what it wanted to do. It knew exactly what it wanted to do.
And that's the interesting thing ultimately about this movie, in a lot of ways for me, is that, as odd as it might sound, this movie's a lot more low key, I think, than people remember. It's very deliberately paced. It's not a very fast paced action film. I mean, not that Halloween is either, but this is, for being like roughly a strict 95-ish minutes, this movie kind of really takes its time, because it tries to do this more as like a murder mystery instead of like impending in Halloween. There's a sense of urgency because there's someone like Loomis who's around, who's trying to get Michael, and you're seeing the fallout of it as it's happening. There is Crazy Ralph in this, but Crazy Ralph has 2 scenes, like, and he's not a real like presence who's trying to stop Jason. He's just, or as we know, Pamela. But like, the point being that there's no one saying, hey, do this thing, like trying to push that and drive that forward. So it makes it a murder mystery at a camp instead.
Which is awesome. It's a great way to look at it. And not what it becomes, but that's what the first film is. It's so different than the rest of the franchise, really. But you don't kind of remember that until you watch it. Because the sequels are done. And I got to tell you, if I remember it correctly, again, I watch these every couple of years, once a year, maybe once every 2 or 3 years. The first couple of films, they pretty much are similarly based. It's like, all right, we're just going to rinse and repeat. It's not until they really get to part 4 that they try something different and new to a degree. But at the same time, this is the one that feels so different because there is no overarching killer that we know of. Like, we know there's a killer, but we ever see the killer. So it's like in the second, third, fourth, we get Jason. We know we're seeing him go around. This one, we get that terrific point of view shot the whole time. It's always the killer from the point of view, which is always a great murder mystery trope. Like, we just get to see through the eyes of the killer, so we have no idea who they are. Although we get to see, does this person know that person? Does this person know that person? Obviously, in this one, we know that Steve eventually, this is jumping ahead, Steve knows the person, has a conversation. Oh, what are you doing here? Kind of thing. Which is always fun as well. But that's really what it is. But the casting really was one of the big things that made the film work. You had to take somebody very, like, for example, for Betsy Palmer, as Pamela Voorhees. Great choice. You take someone who, funnily enough, didn't want the part at first because it was a little bit beneath her, then decided to take it. And let's be completely honest, for the audiences of today, of 2023, like the younger audiences, they probably much more from Friday the 13th than from her previous like successes, and the good wholesome look that she had. But at the time, she was known as being a very good, wholesome mother kind of figure.
Yeah.
To turn that on its head and make her the psychotic killer, that's awesome. That just worked well for the casting.
I always love stuff like that. Honestly, I like when actors play against type. It was one of my favorite things that Dick Van Dyke would do after like the Dick Van Dyke Show. He very famously played murderers on like Matlock and Diagnosis Murder and like trying to play villain roles. Shatner did it a couple of times on things like Columbo and things like that. I kind of like when actors actually stretch their legs a little bit and we see them outside of their comfort zone, because it also makes us uneasy.
Right.
Because when you get used to seeing someone a certain way and then to flip it on its head, that's why the Betsy Palmer of it all was always like a stroke of genius casting. And unfortunately, it's one that didn't.
I guess I really interject really quickly. One that worked for me: Harrison Ford and What Lies Beneath.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I don't love that movie, but yeah,
made me completely uneasy that Harrison Ford was not a good guy.
Yeah,
he usually is.
Right.
Go ahead, though.
No, I was going to say what's interesting is like in the Betsy Palmer of it all is that then afterwards, the back and forth she's had with this franchise for so long, like they'd try to use her appearance, but they never wanted to pay her for doing it. Like it's such a bummer. Like there was so much back and forth on her after the
fact. Right.
Like no matter, she's so iconic in the movie itself, and yet at the same time, now it's almost like that's bit her in some capacity, where then the studios don't actually want to pay her for, like, because I know they wanted her for Freddy versus Jason, you know, and so that's why Pamela kept getting recast as the movies would go.
As I had to do it, unfortunately. But I think she eventually came to terms with it eventually, but it does have that back and forth feel to it. I know she didn't, she was kind of mocking at first about, like, I'm going to do this little whatever part, nobody's going to see it, yada, yada, but whatever. But she did play the part professionally. That was the important thing.
Yes. Oh, 100%. So, you know, as this is going, the other thing that's interesting is that Victor Miller, the guy who writes this movie, he's actually part of why all those lawsuits and things have been going on since. But the funny thing is he was like a prominent writer of soap operas. Yeah. And that's a very interesting concept to introduce to the world of slashers. And I think that it also makes him oddly like a very perfect person for this in a lot of ways. So my mom used to watch a ton of soap operas around me growing up. And one of the things that I got very used to in seeing that stuff growing up was they would like weirdly go off the rails and do these like weird supernatural mysteries, or there's like murder, you know, these long arcs about someone is murdered and they're trying to figure out who did it. And it was like, honestly, someone from the world of the soap operas coming into the horror genre is not the worst.
No,
because they kind of play with that stuff all the time.
Absolutely.
And that's probably what makes this movie so successful, is that because of that, this dude ends up having so many characters that you don't really care about the characters, say, like the way you do in Halloween, but he balances all the characters so that you kind of get their dynamics, you get what's going on, and it's a big ensemble piece. Perfect for a dude who wrote soap operas, and perfect for a guy who can add drama to that sort of world that you don't necessarily get, because Halloween, again, has a cast of 3-4 major characters, maybe, and that's pretty much it. Like, this movie actually has more than that, and there's dynamics with these characters. They're all teenagers and camp counselors. Now, you know, the dynamics are they're horny teenagers, but there's things that are going on there, you know? Like, so him being brought in actually adds to this weird, almost trying to make it, and I hate the term, but elevated horror, if you will.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
you tried to make it look more professional. Look at this. We got a guy who writes for daytime television.
Right. Exactly. It
You
doesn't
know?
really work out as far as looking like an elevated horror, as much as we hate that term, but it is a way to look like it does. I agree with what you're saying
Right.
on that. They have some interesting casting choices again that led that direction. I know this is the first real big role, if you will, for Kevin Bacon. Um, Although initially enough, I forgot until I recently reread it that the role of Alice was initially going to be Sally Field, or they were sort of going to
Oh
go for Sally
man, that would have
Field,
been fucking dope.
right? It could have been very
God
fucking
damn
cool.
it. Somehow I missed this before, or I always just like box it into my memory so I don't remember because I don't like being sad about it. Now, granted, that is not a dig, obviously, at
Adrian
Adrienne
King,
King.
not at all, not
She's
at all.
incredible in this.
I
She's
think Sally Field was
fantastic.
just too much money. It was too much money for them. Was basically what happened.
But
Kind of
god
like,
damn it,
well,
imagine Sally Field in this.
it'd been fucking great. But again, Adrian King does a kick-ass job. She's good.
No, I know, but I'm
Totally
just saying, look, dude, she was Gidget. She was the flying nun. Like,
Right.
I just love Sally Field, all right? Whatever.
I hear you. I hear you. I understand your crushes there, but that's okay.
Yeah, well.
But yeah, it was like the rest were no names. The rest were like kind of actresses who didn't really have much of a actors didn't have much history. They were all newcomers, which is again very typical of the horror genre, especially a cheaper horror. You don't want to go with anybody who's really too established. They spend their money on their Betsy Palmer, which is what was the role was actually probably needed the most. You can get away with kids playing kids. You can't get away with unless you hire a psycho mother to play a psycho mother. It's not quite as easy of a role to fill. Luckily, the cast really kind of seemed to get on together, and I think it has to do again with the budget because with the budget they all had to shoot together, they all had to live together, they all had to like pretty much be together nonstop during the shoot. I think that kind of helped with the camaraderie, and it kind of comes out in the movie. So you get to know these characters a little bit, and what you don't know, you at least believe the relationships, if nothing else.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely. And I think that the one thing between all of them, like having a Kevin Bacon, which again, that's the other thing we forget, Kevin Bacon's in this guy too. Like this is introducing Kevin
right.
Bacon, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, 3 small roles beforehand, but nothing serious.
yeah, this is his big breakout in
Yeah.
so many ways.
Mhm.
But you look at it and these characters all just kind of feel real and like you do feel like you'd be hanging out with them at a summer camp sort of thing. Like I vibe with this movie a lot of the time just for the interactions with them and like the way that the drama of it all kind of plays out more than anything because again this movie's actually fairly methodically paced.
Yep.
Some could call it boring.
Sure.
I don't think it's the most exciting movie in this franchise. You're so right about it being so different than all the other movies, and I think that that's an interesting concept in general to talk about as far as horror first installments go. Because when you look at a lot of the early installments in horror franchises that have gone on to become so popular, this is a pretty like standard thing now. Like the
Yeah.
original Saw is massively different than what the Saw franchise eventually becomes. In the same way that the original Halloween is different than what the Halloween franchise becomes, et cetera, et cetera.
Same with Nightmare. Same thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And not even just horror franchises, any franchise that's worth its salt reinvents itself over the years. Look at our famous Fast and the Furious franchise. Very different.
Yeah.
First one that is from Fast 10, where we're all superheroes now. So I mean, like it's that's the best way to do it. You're gonna it's always a small beginning, and they have to get bigger. Because sequels too, that's sequelitis. You got to get bigger and better each time you go. By the time you get up to like 9, 10 in films, you got to be pretty big and out there at that point.
Well, that's the one thing. I mean, and eventually we will get to it. But like, one of the things I like about Friday the 13th is that everything after 3, they're just consistently trying to figure out different ways to make the franchise feel different or relevant. And so, this franchise in particular, it has no one direction. Like, it's just kind of throwing darts at a dartboard and seeing what sticks. And I love that. Like, that's what makes it special. But then you look back at the first one where it's like actually a very methodical teen drama that is a murder mystery, and you're like, oh, this is incredibly different.
100%. It's like you said also too, because we mentioned the term again. We hate it. We're not going to try to use it too often, but the elevated horror. Halloween has been noted as being one of the greatest horror films of all time. Very well written, very well crafted, et cetera, et cetera. When you turn Halloween and turn something different, it's difficult. Friday the 13th was enough of an open palette that every time you change it up, it's not as people don't freak out as much about getting a totally different Friday the 13th movie. Because that palette is wide enough that you can allow certain things in that in the landscape. You could have a Jason go to space. They talk about doing a Michael Myers in space movie, but it never got off the ground. But can you imagine a Michael in space movie? It doesn't work. Jason in space? Absolutely. Because
See, it depends on the character, right? Because the way they've built Jason to this point, when you get to Jason X, sending Jason to space just makes sense.
Sure,
in the same way that, Warwick Davis, Leprechaun, send him to space. I buy it. Honestly, you could send Freddy to space. That's the one I'm a little surprised they hadn't, because Freddy in like space with astronauts who have to be in like deep hibernation and stuff. That's a fascinating concept that we've never touched on. Like,
absolutely.
Michael in space doesn't make sense though, because Michael's too grounded in, as weird as that might sound, Michael's far too grounded in like backwater suburbia America type stuff. Like, Jason has been everywhere. He's dealt with little evil telekinetic girls. Like, he's come back as Frankenstein's monster. He, et cetera, et cetera. Went to hell. Like, there's so many things. Yeah, he's taken Manhattan. Like, he takes a cruise. I still contend that Jason Takes Manhattan should just be called Jason Takes a Cruise.
Yeah, I do too.
Because, for a 90-minute movie, an hour of it takes place on a boat.
We'll get to that when we get there, but it's absolutely the case. Unfortunately, part of that was budget as well. But yeah, it is Jason on a cruise ship, basically. Jason takes on Carnival or something, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, Jason Takes a Carnival Cruise. Boy, what a Friday the 13th Part 8. Jason Takes a Carnival Cruise. That sells. I watched that movie.
Absolutely. Why wouldn't you? How could you not? But
have you? I don't want to get ahead of us. I want to start talking about Takes Manhattan, and I don't want to do it yet because I have thoughts about that movie.
I have a lot of thoughts on that movie too, and I actually have a love-hate relationship with it. But we'll get there. We'll definitely get there.
I have a mostly love relationship with it. I'm of a different ilk of that movie.
I'm a latecomer love of that film. Let's put it that way. I've come around on it a lot.
Fair enough.
All right, we'll get there.
So I have to ask you, because you were young enough when this opened. Did you see this in theaters initially?
No. I was way too young. I was only about 4 when it came out. I mean, like,
dude, that doesn't mean jack shit. All right, my parents were taking me to see stuff when I was younger that I probably should have been watching.
My mom wouldn't have. My father might have gotten away with it. My father might have tried to get away with it, but he was never a big horror buff himself, so there's no reason he would have taken me. That's the kind of thing. He was much more likely to take me to see a Western or an action piece, potentially. But yeah, no, I never got to see it in the theaters. I didn't get to see any of them in the theaters until, I want to say New Blood was the first one I saw in theaters, I want to say. Because I just didn't have any real full-on... See, I was a little bit late bloomer to horror. I didn't really get into horror. I got The Shining when I was younger. The Shining intrigued me in horror, but that was probably that was after it was in theaters, like 82, 83, somewhere around there. So that's how I really got into going to movies and going to see horror myself, was that probably New Blood. But I do remember hearing about it. I remember hearing about it when I was young. I remember hearing about when Part 4 came out, Part 5 came out, how Jason was a slasher. And I was freaked out by him a little bit, just by the posters and stuff.
Well, as one should be. Like, it's an incredible looking. It's an incredible design. What am I wearing right now? I mean, come on.
Absolutely. So, I think I stayed away from hockey for a couple of years because of it. But I do remember the Tom gone out how basically it was Freddy and Jason were the 2 big ones at that point. Michael Myers was even kind of forgotten when I was talking originally. It wasn't until Halloween 4 came back in the theaters that Michael Myers kind of entered the space again. Look, that was the first one I saw. First Halloween I saw in the theaters was Halloween 4. So.
Oh man, I'm a little jealous. I've only seen the zombie films and the newer trilogy, I think, in theaters. I never saw H2O in theaters. I never saw Resurrection in theaters.
That's okay.
Well, yeah. Although Resurrection was the first one I owned on DVD, sadly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because Friday 13 New Blood starts 7. So that's so funny to me. Halloween comes out in 78. Friday 13 comes out in 1980. Yeah, 1988. It's the fourth sequel. It's only Halloween 4. It's Friday 7. That's how quickly these get pushed out. And that's again 1988. So both of those are the ones I saw in the theater that year. That's when I first started going.
And we have to remember Paramount. Yeah, that's so interesting. Paramount really got in on the one horror film a year thing, which became very popular also, later with Saw and Paranormal Activity, and Paranormal Activity also being Paramount. So it's just very interesting that in a lot of ways, this first Friday film, like the first Paranormal Activity, like the first Saw, they're these very different films that are kind of made cheaply to just make money at one time, chasing trends, doing things, and then they pop off and create these franchises that couldn't grow to be more different. And each one of them runs into the same thing of the more you keep trying to do it once a year just to chase that money, you're leveraging diminishing returns because it starts to ramp up until you start to realize you don't know what to do and where to go. And that starts to crater creatively, which starts to crater the audience.
Right.
So just kind of fascinating that this is the original conceit, if you will, of that. Even because horror movies really didn't do that at this point.
No, not at all. I mean, sequels were kind of new-ish anyway at this point. There wasn't a whole lot of things with sequels. 70s,
unless
there were very sequels.
Yeah, unless we're talking like the road movies with like Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, or like, Mom, Pa Kettle sort of things, or Abbott and Costello making how many movies together.
Right.
But you weren't really sequelizing things, or the Universal Monsters who also were doing the thing, in the 40s before it disappeared again.
Right. That's what it is. It almost feels like they should have just given a little. I mean, people get greedy. Surprisingly, studios and producers got greedy. It's like, we can pump this out for $500,000 million. We can get like 50, 70 million. Just keep doing it every year. Let's make that green. Whereas they don't realize is that if they just took their time with it, and they had like maybe 2 or 3 years in between, they could have kept up that rate. And also, there's a little thing called supply and demand. Whereas like there's that if you make people wait a little bit longer than they really wanted, they ramp back up to see it. And otherwise it's like, I can miss this one, I'll catch the next one. That just happens, especially after the 4th or 5th one. It's like, I've seen 3 or 4 in a row. Let's just whatever. I can watch it in VHS or something at that point.
Yeah, so. I mean, it happens now. You talk to people with the Fast and the Furious movies, they're like, oh my God, this is the 10th movie. Like, I've seen all these. Maybe I'll watch it on demand at that point.
Right.
Like, that is kind of a reality when you start to play with big numbers in franchises. It's honestly the one thing that indie might have been very smart about ultimately. We spent a lot of time where I talked about where I think there was a lot of mistakes made in the time between getting to 3 and 4 and then 4 to 5, just in the not really utilizing the IP in certain ways or whatever. But on the other hand, you have to give them credit where credit's due. They only made 5 movies, right? And I would never say that it felt like they were going too much. Like, let's talk about the fact that you want people to come back to things. Well, let's make them wait 15 years, 19 years, or et cetera, et cetera. So there's a balance here, Hollywood. I know that we're just 2 mediocre white dudes sitting on microphones, but there is a balance to waiting 19 years for a sequel or waiting 1 year for a sequel. We can find some in between.
Yes,
I promise.
Definitely places in between you can go. But yeah, especially if you take time in between, you can take a little bit of time in between, because therefore you still can pump out as many. Like, you're still pumping out a lot of movies that way. You're still getting a lot of bang for your buck, but you're just going to maintain the quality, which means, of course, it's going to go longer in the long run. Keep the quality up, you can keep coming back. It's tired. You don't get tired of it as much. So, I mean, what do we know? It's just us 2 mediocre white dudes.
Yeah, it's the thing that It's one of those we're armchair. What do we want to call ourselves?
Armchair
Armchair
quarterbacks.
Imagineers. Yeah, quarterback types. Yeah. Well, it's one
Not
of those
true.
things. But I think it also comes from a place of you and I have been around this space for a long time.
Yep.
We know the ins and outs of how a lot of this stuff operates and works. But the Friday franchise is fascinating because you look at it and they have made so many of these movies. Again, 12 to this date. The fact that we're stuck at 12. How is there not 13 Friday the 13th movies?
On
I
sheer name
digress.
alone. I
I
know.
know. I know.
It's like, are you kidding
It's
me?
so frustrating. Yeah, like guys, come on now. But they've made 12 of these to date. They've traversed multiple different studios, lawsuits, crossovers, comic books, novels. There are Friday the 13th novels. Yes, that's a real thing. Video games
Have you ever
where
read the
Kane
novels,
Hodder
by the
came
way?
back. Huh?
Have you ever read the novels? Any of the
I
novels?
actually haven't. I've
I
read the
haven't either.
comics.
Okay.
But I have meant to get to those. Like these things all exist.
I know.
Friday is a huge cultural cachet in such an
Mhm.
interesting way. Jason is so iconic. I have a freaking Pikachu with a Jason mask on my arm right there. Like,
If you were to
come
see a
on.
hockey mask out there, I'm kind of curious how many people think of hockey and how many people actually think of Friday the 13th. Because I think it's a lot closer to Friday the 13th than people would actually want to admit.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that
And that
the
didn't happen
look
until
is
part
so
3.
iconic. I know.
It's like we get
That's
Jason
yeah, like
part 2.
Jason doesn't wear the mask till part 3. It's wild.
It's frick out there.
But it's just really funny, man. Like I sit
Oh.
here and I think about it a lot where I adore this franchise and then you go back to the original and it every single time when I come back to it, I always just go, "Damn, it's just so different." And it makes me laugh because when they hired the actors for the movie and you see it now in hindsight, they were not looking for good actors
No,
necessarily.
no.
They just wanted people that they thought were fun and that people would like on screen, which man, poor Kevin Bacon. That just says that they didn't think he was a very good actor. They just wanted someone likable on screen. But I just find it funny that a movie like this where they weren't necessarily trying to make it good. They weren't even necessarily doing it for the right reasons. They were only doing it because they were trying to cash in on the success of a movie from 2 years before.
Yep.
And yet now it's this cultural landmark in filmmaking.
Well, it's
How
like I
does
said
that happen?
before. It's like I said before that, like, and like kind of like in given all the time it's been since then, and how much of a pop culture icon Jason's become, and how known the franchise is. I mean, everyone knows. Even if you're not a horror buff, you hear Friday the 13th, you're going to think of Jason Voorhees, and you're going to think of the franchise. You know the franchise, and yet, so when we get to that kind of cultural icon zeitgeist, yeah, kind of go back and elevate. Oh, the original, it spawned this. How can it be anything but amazing? How can it be anything but like well crafted, thought out? And no, it's not. Sean Cunningham didn't give a shit about it. He just didn't care, and he just like whatever, we'll make it work. And it's all haphazard. It's all thrown together. It looks that way. It feels that way to a degree, but it does enough to work. It taps into some certain things that work. As far as a primal level goes, you bring on someone like a Tom Savini, who, my God, Tom Savini, like his makeup is phenomenal. He's so inventive, so creative,
The
so
kills
energetic.
in this are fantastic because of the makeup he does.
And he is the reason why this movie honestly is more as memorable as the memorable scenes are his, to be completely honest. And he started a really revolution along with like other producers or people at the time, similar time, get the Bakers and the Botines and all those kind of people who do the werewolf effects. They got these real earthy, gritty, lived in effects that really kind of really make you watch and go, wow. And really kind of strikes out against, again, I'm not someone who argues against CGI versus practical and stuff. CGI definitely had its spots, and I think could be, could and should be used a lot more nowadays and everything because you have the ability to do so. But there is something to be said sometimes about this kind of like that. You can feel you feel like you can touch that gore. You feel like you can
Yeah.
right live in it and live in that gore. That's
Well,
Tom
I
Savini.
mean, that he's so good at that. It's why his Night of the Living Dead remake is so good too, because he really
Mhm.
goes in on so much of that same physical prop and blood that you're talking about. And that's actually why, when you look at it, you know, the Kevin Bacon murder in this movie is iconic for so many reasons. And a big part of that is because of the physical nature of the arrow going through the back of his neck and out the front.
Right, and it works. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny if you look at that now, and you really look at it, you can see where the effect comes in and how it's done. You can kind of see
Oh,
that
of course.
thing. If you especially now we have like Blu-ray and high def and everything else. You got to remember a lot of these things back in the day. I saw an interview on somebody recently. Like they were talking about making movies back in the day. Well, we didn't expect like I think it was George Lucas actually. We didn't expect DVD and frame. We just kind of like
Yeah.
made it for the film grainy film. Like, you can get away with it. Now you can stop everything frame by frame. You can see kind of the magic behind the scenes, so to speak. But if you aren't looking for it, and if you were of that time, it just looks amazingly real, amazingly powerful. And one of the best things about that particular kill, which we're just jumping right into, and that's fine. I love the fact that like it was a mistake that led to its best part. You remember, like
Mhm.
there's the idea basically they cut the arrow goes through the skinish or the mold, and there's supposed to be a pump that like pump the blood out. That pump blood as it goes out, and there's some kind of thing didn't work. They only had time for one shot, or only enough budget for one shot. So the guy was down there, just took the tube, blew into the tube, and makes this big like spurt of blood to come out, and it's such a perfect addition and like the frosting on the cake of the effects that you can't imagine it without it now. I love when that
Yeah.
happens. When mistakes become such a crucial part of the shot.
I think that actually some of the best things in film can come from that sort of thing. That's why that sequence continues to stand out and
Mhm.
stand the test of time in so many regards. And a lot of the kills in the movie are just kind of, standard whatever. But when you have a moment like that that just stands out, it's really impressive.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
I do also want to say to that point, the one thing that does bother me about this movie, and this is talked about a lot with a lot of people, and it is still kind of a debate amongst the fans, but it is a little. It's really hard to watch when they kill the snake because the snake in the
Yeah,
movie is
real.
actually murdered. Like that is a real snake.
It's a snuff film for snakes, really.
Yeah, and that was not the right move. It's kind of a thing that I wish that had been dealt with in a different scenario. I'm not big on killing things on camera for the sake of killing things on camera. Um,
Right. No matter how big horror fans we are, we don't like the real killings at this point. But
yeah, it doesn't matter if it's an animal or not. Like, not good with it. So that's the one thing I think is a huge mistake. I think Sean Cunningham could have done literally anything else.
mhm.
Um,
I mean,
he really didn't need that.
we didn't. I don't want to excuse it. It is obviously a far different time back then, and people didn't realize. I don't think humanity, despite where we've gotten to so far, despite where we are, has in many ways taken a lot of steps forward in terms of how they behave and how they handle themselves. Something you would never see
Mhm.
happen today, and it's not right then either. Um, I'm not gonna sit
No, I
and
know.
say, like, cancel, try to cancel Sean
Oh no,
Cunningham
definitely
20 years
not.
later. But you're right, and that should be noted that what did happen, and it's something it's regretful. It's definitely regretful.
Yeah, and it's just a thing that I would rather be like, yes, it happened and it was wrong, but it is what it is. Like,
Right.
unfortunately, it was the choice that was made on a low budget horror film.
Yeah.
I just felt like if we didn't at least address it, it is
Right.
overlooking the nature of exactly what you've been talking about this whole time, haphazardly put together just to
Mhm.
chase money.
Money. Yeah.
But one of the things I will say is for a movie that is kind of low key, haphazardly put together and chasing all that, the way that this movie became so interestingly intertwined with horror to the point that it is now one of the movies that I would say has affected the horror genre almost more than any other. And that is with the crazy Ralph of it all and the kind of character that you see in these horror films of, you're doomed,
You
doomed, the
do.
crazy man who's trying to stop the people from going into the forest, but maybe he's actually the killer. Like every movie now, when you are dealing with this sort of scenario almost always has a character like that. And
Oh
it
yeah,
really stems from here. And I kind of love that.
got like Bloodworth, the Final Destination series, which kind of works that
Yeah.
way to a degree. You know, Grandpa from like Silent Night, Deadly Night, the
Mhm.
bartender that's in My Bloody Valentine. Yeah, they're all basically Ralph derivations, I guess I should say.
Yeah,
But
like, and it's so different than Loomis, right? Because
right,
Loomis is a character, a real character who is not crazy. He is just trying to stop this guy. But
right,
Ralph is just there to be kind of uncomfortable, kind of
yeah.
weird, kind of warning people. I loved how Cabin in the Woods played it up.
Oh yeah, that was great. That's funny. That was very funny. I did actually love Crazy Ralph as well. I remember watching. I'll shout it out now. The Camp Crystal Lake Memories
Oh, dude, the
documentary,
best.
which is so
Yeah.
good. And I can't
Crystal Lake
remember
Memories is
which
a great
Crystal
talk.
Lake. I can't remember which actress it was. One of the actresses was saying that Ralph was so like memorable that they didn't realize that that wasn't actually him. That he was an actor playing a character. They thought he was just that was who he was, and they caught him off scene once. And he was just like the nicest guy, a sweetheart. That
Oh, of course.
of course, which is so funny to me. Which is so great. Um,
Yeah.
you know what else I want to throw out there, by the way,
Hmm.
totally a little side back, but I'm kind of just so everybody knows. I always have the movies going on in the background because I catch things and I forget to write down and stuff as I don't have like the audio on. It's like, oh,
For sure.
We see in the very beginning of the film, well, actually, after the cold open, so to speak, which is very cool by itself, by its way too, with the slow motion.
Yeah, what is it?
And
1957, the opening. Yeah.
Camp Crystal Lake, and then you go and you see the killings again from point of view, when it had that stop, that fade to white, and like it was almost like a James Bond intro with the Friday the 13th comes right off the camera like that. Probably aping James Bond, to be honest with you. Like, oh, we could do that, get away with that.
A little bit, yeah, and it breaking the glass later,
right?
Yeah.
And Henry Mancini, I'll throw this out there too, going hard. He goes hard in the score of this film, like places he didn't need to go, and yet it worked very well for it. I love the fact it's kind of an iconic.
Harry Manfredini.
Oh, sorry,
Harry Mancini.
Mancini.
Yeah, Harry Mancini's a very different composer.
Still goes hard. I maintain that. Yeah, Harry Manfredini, but he does go hard in a way that like you don't almost expect from a horror film.
Yes,
because it's a very grand classic kind of like soundtrack in a way, but it also has the great that like just you say that you know exactly what we're talking about. Exactly.
A sound Dipper does not like, by the way. Anytime I do that, he gets very upset. I used to wander through the house doing it when they were puppies just to like mess with them, and so anytime he hears it, he gets real like up in arms and he barks at me.
So what's interesting is, but not only we talk about all the time about how it apes Halloween, but in a way it apes Psycho to a degree too. In certain aspects, especially the beginning, you have this Annie who's walking to town and she's heading towards Camp Crystal Lake. She's the one who actually comes up to Crazy Ralph at first, and the truck driver. Who, by the way, I love the fact that the truck driver shoots down Crazy Ralph and like says he's an idiot, then basically says the same things he's saying to her. Like says the exact same spiel, but just more sanely.
Well, done. Because it's not Crazy Ralph saying it now, so it must be right.
Right, absolutely. But Annie is like, it's kind of like you think she's the main character, kind of like Janet Leigh in Psycho in the beginning. You think that we're going to follow her throughout this film, and we don't, because as we know later on that it's not. It's Alice who is the final girl of it all, so to speak. And I love how it does that, because I love how it kind of like drags it out just a little bit. And in a film that is very methodically done, that's one of those cool, like, oh, misdirection. Okay, so I had to keep my eye open for a little bit misdirection.
Well, and I would argue too, to that point, the Psycho of it all also goes into the twist, right? Yeah. But the twist goes the other direction, because in Psycho, the reveal obviously being Norman has been the killer the entire time, pretending to be
spoilers.
I know, spoilers for the movie that came out in 1960.
You can yell at me about the movie from 1980, and I can yell at you.
No. One of these is an Alfred Hitchcock movie that is well known, and pish posh, you be quiet in the corner. I know. So, so we have that reveal being, of course, Norman has been mother the entire time. He just doesn't know. But this movie is Jason is not the killer. It's been Jason's mother the entire time. And Jason's still dead, as far as we're aware. And the reason she's doing it, of course, is because these teenagers were having sex and my son drowned. And now all you teenagers must pay. And it's like, that happened in 1957. It's 1980. Pardon all the shits, but you're still trying to murder these teens over this?
They're still having sex, PJ. They're still having sex.
This movie has like a weird, honestly, like almost right-wing Republican look at that, though. Like, and I think we need, like, that was the horror genre in some ways. Now it's pivoted to be a lot more vocal about that sort of thing, but like these movies are very like the people who have sex or do drugs are who are murdered.
Yeah. And I remember watching a lot of documentaries on this, and they all claim that wasn't meant to be the case. That was the message they were sending, but it does come across that way. Absolutely.
Oh, it totally does. I just think it's so interesting. And
right at the beginning,
whether they meant to do it or not, it is exactly what happened.
I mean, we open up, and during that cold open, we're having like a religious sing along with a guitar, and they're doing some kind of very religious songs, and then the countdowns go off to have sex, and they're the ones that are killed.
Yeah,
it's just
like it. Yeah, and it was funny because I forget that they're singing like kind of nice, happy, religious sounding music at the campfire, and then the ones who walk away from that are the ones who are murdered. So whether they meant to or not, it definitely takes this like odd stance in the middle of the 80s when the rise of the Reagan era politics and the rise of people being, we're moving away from that 60s era. The 70s were so hard on people that now we're moving away from free love and people doing whatever people want to do. Now we're not condoning it, we're condemning it.
Right.
And if you're a teenager who's like buying into all this, well, guess what that means? We're just going to murder you later.
Mm-hmm. But if you stay drug-free and sex-free, you will survive the killer. Now, again, the creators all deny it, but it's hard to believe it. I'm going to be honest. It's hard to believe because that's the point we get over and over and over again.
Now, granted, of course, as the movies go on, it's just becoming that because that is the precedent that the original has set up. But the fact of the matter is that in 1980, that was what was said. And that's, again, it probably wasn't ever really intended to be that way, but just very fascinating.
Absolutely. I just see Crazy Ralph on my screen right now. I got to ask, like we talked about it a little bit, what's his story? I want a Crazy Ralph spinoff. I want to know what this guy's been through. What kind of life has this guy had?
I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, regarding that TV show that we talked about up top, because assuming if it ever happens at this point, and that's not to say that I don't think it will because I don't want it. I'm more just saying like I want the writers to strike as long as they have to.
Absolutely.
Because I want them to get their bag. So if the Friday the 13th TV show never happens because the strike keeps happening, I would rather we never get it just because I want people to be paid what they're worth.
100%.
But in all of that, I just kind of look at this and I go, that is the kind of story that seems perfect for that TV show because the rumor is that it's supposed to be an anthology that kind of tells different stories in different time periods, following different characters. Like, come on, man, let's do that.
That's one of the main ones. That should be one of the first ones pitched. But yeah, I love it. I love it so much. So anyway, so we get to the camp itself now. And this is where, what a dynamic. I mean, you got to remember, I always forget that these aren't camp, like they're not visitors, they're counselors. So I just got to remember that because they look young. We don't know necessarily how young. Now, let me ask you this. Steve and Alice, it's kind of a weird vibe there. I don't know what's going on with their age, what their differences are, how that happened, but it's a very strange vibe between them. Steve with the shirtless guy with the bandana around his neck, the artist, and you got Alice, the other artist who doesn't really want to be there. And they kind of like put this whole scene together. This is where the daytime soap opera thing comes in. You talk about that's never really truly followed up on. Is it just space filler? Is it good backstory? I don't know what the difference is sometimes. Like, it's like, do I need to know this?
I think it's a little space filler, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a weird situation. I've never loved that portion of the movie. Um, I'm I have an actual back and forth a little bit with this movie, and we were
Okay.
talking a little bit about it off screen. Is I actually don't enjoy this one nearly as much as I enjoy the later entries because I think I came to the series much later.
Right.
Um, the first time I saw it, it was not the original. I must have seen five, 4 or 5 first, and then saw like Jason X, and I saw these all wildly out of order until I finally sat down to finally get back to the original.
Okay.
And
Okay.
um, when I finally sat down with it, the like what we've kind of talked about of the methodical pacing of it all, of the way that it plays out, the way that it is, I had come to expect Friday to be so specifically those movies. And to
That's
go back and see this has always kind of been a weird thing because I saw it so out of context of the others to that, or in context of the others to that point, that it felt weird and feels off. And as much I still enjoy it, but it is not my favorite to go back to because I don't find it as fun. And I
yeah.
know
I
that's a
can
weird
see
word
that.
to use, and I think that comes down to the characters even at times. I love
Yeah.
Alice, but there's not a lot as much as I like hanging out with the characters in some capacity, I don't know anything about them or I don't care about them, and I feel like there's this weird they want us to, and I like hanging with them, and I know I'm going a little against of kind of what I said earlier where it's like I do like the actors. I think that they're good at what they do, but I'm also not sure I care at times.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Because, like, honestly speaking, they are. They do a good job. The actors do fine jobs with their roles. I just don't really. They are kind of like, substitute one for the other, and I probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference because they're not very drawn out completely. It's kind of like, okay, you're gonna fill this archetype, you're gonna fill this archetype. You got like the jock kind of guy with Kevin Bacon, the head guy. You got the practical Joker guy. Who, by the way, I feel like this might be the first time it's like I think he kind of sets the tone for practical jokers in horror films going forward. You know that the practical joker's going to die; they have to
Oh yeah,
die.
absolutely.
And I think this begins here. If I could be mistaken, but I'm not sure. I mean, I guess Paul in Halloween is kind of a Joker. It's a
Kind
glasses,
of,
but
but not nearly as much at
as
the
this that
same
much this
time.
guy. So, but I guess it's at least they're likable. Sometimes you can have the you can commit the sin, so to speak, but the sin of making characters not only you don't know them, but like they're unlikable. You want them to die, which can
Yeah.
kind of be not good because you're almost as a horror fan, you tend to be the ones who root for the good kills anyway. But when you want the characters to die, it doesn't seem to you're succeeding in what you want to do. You want to have that mixed feeling about it. Root for the characters to die, but be like, oh no, I want to see that one get away though, because like
I feel like with Alice, right? And that's actually why I love the rise of the final girl, if you will. Because I always feel like I like the final girl because you're supposed to. And everyone
right,
around her is usually really insufferable for the most
yep,
part, which is
yep,
why I never feel bad when they die. And that's kind of what the Friday franchise became.
yep,
Although Tommy Jarvis, similarly, great character, a character that
yes.
gets better as the franchise goes.
Well, that's why he's the one that lasts a couple of movies in a way. I mean, Alice had her reasons. Of course, we'll talk about that probably more on Friday the 13th
Yes.
Part Two, why she didn't come back, or she kind of half came back for a little bit. But Tommy Jarvis was the first one to really kind of besides her took a they took a holding and wanted to see more from him to the point where we still get films with him today. They are the fan film variety because he's a character that just don't love. Look,
It's it's a little interesting actually. I'm having this thought in this moment while we're sitting here, and it kind of goes into a thing you and I have talked about with franchises in general and like letting franchises recast and evolve and be different. And it's interesting to me that the horror genre is really good at doing horror movies that do not follow the same characters and still being successful at doing it, as long as the killer is always there.
Yeah,
But then at the same time, we're now seeing like we're going backwards in that, where they're finding ways to force Jamie Lee Curtis back into the Halloween movies, or finding ways to The Exorcist.
Exorcist.
You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? Like trying to find both these David Gordon Green, funny enough, but like the point being is we're seeing a lot more of this forcing the hand of keeping characters and actors involved in
right.
franchises because that's what they're recognized for, versus these older Friday the 13th movies and even the Halloween movies, to a small point, of being able to pivot in with new characters or pivot with a different set of eyes, like creating a new character that can take over for Jamie Lee Curtis after Halloween 2. You know, that sort of thing. That way the
Meaning like
franchise can
Jamie Lloyd.
continue.
I mean, like Jamie Lloyd.
Yeah, right. And so being able to do that,
And
it's
that's
just
good. I mean, that's why I hope they have a legacy. I still hold on to my hope that there'll eventually be a Halloween legacy sequel with Jamie Lloyd. Um, obviously, you have to disregard Curse of Michael Myers.
and I'd be totally fine if they did that. It's just an interesting thing to think about, though, because the Friday movies made it a point that usually you weren't following characters unless, again, it was like, say, Tommy Jarvis from one movie to another,
It's
or
the
et
character,
cetera, et
right?
cetera. Right. You were
And they
just doing
recast it
different
twice.
things.
They recast it twice. I mean, granted, I think horror can get away with that more than other franchises can. I feel like horror is more forgiving that way, but it is
And I
like,
think that's what's interesting.
yeah, I agree. I do think also the reason of it not being happening is because not only horror but legacy sequels in general have become a new thing. Not a new thing, but have become a popular thing. And legacy sequel means you bring back your old favorites. And some people have kind of thought that meant they have to have the original actors play. I mean, we could get a conversation. I don't want to get. We're not going to get a conversation about it because I don't get very different views. But on the Flash, for example, bringing Michael Keaton back was a thing they did instead of having a different Batman or whatever. But they do that all the time. I think you could get away with it not being them, but I think producers need to be shown that because
Well, and
unfortunately
that's
you're
what,
doing the wrong thing. Because like Solo, for example,
yeah, right. And
Solo,
that's
which I
exactly,
loved Alden Ehrenreich in that.
and we have to remember there was more to the Solo situation than just the Alden of it all. There
Of
was the
course,
release date. There was a lot that happened with that movie, but you're not wrong that the casting played a part.
people
But
blame that
is
though
it
also
because,
on it.
but are we also, like, to that point, is it the fault of the movie, or is it the fault of the fact that we are not conditioning audiences to allow characters to grow past the initial people playing them?
Exactly my
And
point.
that's ultimately the question that I am putting out there to it, because I'm very excited for the fact that Steven Spielberg is doing a new Bullet film.
Yeah.
People A lot of people think that's very strange because they love the original and they think Steve McQueen is the only person who could play that character, but I think Bradley Cooper is just as talented and just honestly more talented. And
Yeah.
I think he can make a better film. So have we conditioned audiences to need an actor, actress, or character that they recognize out the gate so much that it doesn't matter if you recast it or not? Or does it have to be someone who is that character at all times? Because
Well,
the other thing is like,
I'm sorry.
oh, I was just going to say, because with Jason or Freddy or Michael, the interesting thing is Freddy was very specifically played by one actor until Robert Englund, or until which was
Jackie Earle
Robert
Haley.
Englund until the remake when Jackie Earle Haley was in it. Yeah.
Right.
But Michael and Jason have had so many different actors play them, and it's only because the look is so iconic you can put anyone under the mask. Now, different people play it different ways, but the character is still the character.
That's true, absolutely true. But you can't tell. Like you can, if you went to I would say a normal fan, a casual fan, and you throw them different Jasons, and you go pick out which one's which. You're like, and so you can get away with it. As far as the other actors go, that becomes more tricky because especially when it comes to iconic roles like the Han Solo
Right.
thing. Harrison Ford doing for Han Solo. You should be able to do it, but you're right in that we are conditioning people the wrong way. But the problem now is we've been conditioning people the other way for so long. It makes it even harder to pump the brakes and try to put it in reverse. If we never
Yeah.
went so far one direction, it's very difficult to go back now.
Absolutely. It's just a really interesting thing that I was thinking about in all of this. And it's actually why I feel like now with Marvel and the multiverse stuff, I'm hoping that after the end of the multiverse saga, we stop doing
They use it, right?
that
You can
sort of
use that
stuff
to do
because, well, not just that, but I want to be able to see literally anyone other than Hugh Jackman play Wolverine. Not
Right.
that's not a dig at Hugh Jackman. It's about audiences also need to be allowed to let go, and that was kind of the point of Logan.
Yeah.
Like the point of Logan was to literally let us let go of that character so someone else could play it. I'm not mad he's coming back, but I would like also to see someone else play the role.
No, honestly speaking, I would be mad if he was coming back. Not mad's the wrong word. I don't get mad. I would be disappointed if he was coming back if it was anything else but Deadpool 3 with Ryan Reynolds. Because there's just
Right.
other extra added
100%.
sides to make that okay. But yeah, like as far as the MCU goes, I don't think Hugh Jackman should come back to play Wolverine at that point. It should definitely be somebody new. And I hope they don't try to fall back onto that. Let me ask you a question, actually, real quick. The Steven Spielberg of it all, The Bullet, is that a remake though, or is that supposed to be some kind of legacy type sequel kind of thing?
It's a new adaptation doing its own thing.
Okay. That's why you can definitely get away with the new actor there. There should be no reason that you shouldn't be able to get away with a new actor there.
Yeah,
It's
so they're
definitely-
doing it a little True Grit, it sounds like, basically.
Okay, and that's fine, and I think that's acceptable for most people too, to a degree.
I
Although
would think,
it is,
but some people.
there is some pushback because it's like, well, why are we touching this famous film, or why are we touching this thing? And it's like, well, we're not. We're just retelling the story in a different kind of way. As long as that's the case, as long as it's not like a cash grab. And I don't think with Steven Spielberg and Bradley Cooper.
Well, it's Steven Spielberg. I don't think he's going to cash grab anything. I mean, look how long he finally waited to do West Side Story.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, that's a different story entirely. Those guys are artists who do what they want to do. And I have faith that they're doing it for the right reasons. So
I do too, which is why I'm excited for that. And basically, the big conversation just becomes and this all comes back to this movie, though, is that like, had they decided after this that Alice continued to be a character, like had Adrian King decided just not to be involved, I wonder if they would have just recast or if they would have just killed the character off or what. Like, just an interesting concept because these movies had no problem bringing back certain characters while also having no problem recasting them every single time.
Yeah, I mean, right there, 4, 5, and 6 all had different
Tommy Jarvis's.
Different Tommy Jarvis's. So, I mean, that makes sense. I think they put it in a way, it's kind of funny because I think part 2's actress was actually probably just as good. We never heard from her again either, I don't believe. Do we? No, Amy Steele?
No.
She has a great job. And Amy Steele is almost like, Amy Steele should have almost just been recast as Alice in a way. It would have been an interesting way to do it. But they didn't. So that's where we're left off, which is fine. Yeah.
But just an interesting conversation as a whole around Friday as a concept and what it has done overall for the thing of it all, if you will. Right. But it's crazy to me too is that this movie, of course, on release was not like the most beloved, but I've loved seeing the cultural kind of reevaluation of it over time because, again, even if it's not my favorite of the franchise, I do think that it has very important parts of itself that matter so strongly to the entire horror genre. Like seeing people looking back at it and going, well, actually, this movie is saying a lot of things and it was doing a lot more than people gave it credit for. It's just kind of nice.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Here's another, again, one of those times where I'm catching something out of the corner of my eye I want to bring up. One of my favorite scenes in this, it's a brief scene, but I love the motorcycle cop. The actor goes really hard.
Oh, yeah.
Can it, coach, please? And Ned is doing the Indian tribal dance thing, being complete cut up. And it encapsulates the best and worst about horror films from the 80s. That I just think this is what you need more. It's a unique character thrown in there. He's catchy. He's funny. And yet it adds a little bit for like, okay, this is where the cop is there somewhere, but he's out probably doesn't come here very often. It's a good character moment for everybody involved, and it kind of breaks out the monotony of counselors running around the camp doing stuff, getting ready. Oh, something different. It's a good pause. It's a good pause to catch your breath, and yet it's still entertaining, probably more than some of the other parts of the film, to be honest with you.
And again, very daytime soap opera to introduce a sequence like that needed to just have happen with a character like that to try to bring levity to a situation.
So good.
Just saying.
To follow that up, of course, right away with the Crazy Ralph Part 2 in the. By the way, how did he get to the kitchen? Like, why did he appear all of a sudden there? It's kind of strange.
Well, again, that was part of their. Well, he might actually just be the killer. Like,
red herring.
He's supposed to just just show up and throw you off while it's happening. When you first saw this,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
My idea when you first saw this, actually, in a way, and if you didn't like, I kind of watched this. I knew Jason was the killer of the Friday the 13th, but I think I knew that Jason wasn't in this one. But either way, if you first saw this, would you ever consider Steve to have been the killer?
I think that there's a little bit where you could see it. Okay. I think there's a little bit of red herring between Ralph. I wouldn't say Tierney. I've considered Sergeant Tierney in the past, but not really. The truck driver isn't like a bad red herring either. Like, they all kind of have it. It's not any of the teenagers. So it always had to be one of the authority figures in some capacity. But I always felt like the truck driver and Steve were the ones overall that made the most sense.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. See, I remember watching it. I remember at one point watching it and thinking the whole time it was probably Steve until we got his death. It's like, he has the Jeep, which of course we see not Alice, Annie get into in the beginning. See her get into a Jeep, and then he's driving a Jeep later on. He's away from the camp when all the camps are happening. He's away from the camp while the deaths are happening and everything else. So and then he comes back and he sees who Pamela is at that point. Oh, okay, well, it's not him. So now who the hell is it? He's like the last red herring to drop, I think. He's the last of the possibilities. It's like, who the heck is the mystery killer at this point?
It's such a fascinating back and forth, too, because we really don't see a lot of Pamela in the movie. Right. So when it happens, it's such a like, like, because you kind of forget about her. She's there, then she's not, then she might be there, and then she's not. Like, it's almost so obvious in hindsight that it's her, and yet I never think about it in that capacity. And I don't even know if I ever registered the first time I saw this. Like, I don't know going in if I even knew Jason wasn't in the movie.
I can't remember. I really can't remember.
Like, I'm sure I had seen Scream to that point, but I don't know if I ever even registered the line of dialogue at the time because I would have been younger.
Right.
So I think part of my watching it for the first time growing up was, I'm sorry, but Jason's not in this?
I think I can't remember because I remember seeing, like I said, I remember seeing Friday the 13th 7, New Blood in theaters. And I probably went back after that, but I kind of was like, I was very much anti-movies from the 70s and before. So like 1980 was just barely cutting it for me. So I probably want to go, if I'm going to go back and watch another Jason movie, let me go watch 6 first. So I probably went back and watched Jason Lives first, the closest to it. Everybody said they liked it, everything else. I watched 4. I probably did this all out of order because I just didn't care as a kid. I was like, whatever, episodic. But when I went back to 1, I probably was actually a little bit bored by it to a degree, because it wasn't quite the same film. Exactly what you were talking about before. It's boring.
Yeah.
Especially if you're younger and you don't want to immerse yourself into what they're trying to do. But I don't know for sure if I can't remember now if I knew or not.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, in hindsight too, because the franchise is so big and so, cult following and stuff. I wonder if for anyone who watches it for the first time similarly now, who is expecting to see Jason, is surprised when they get to the end. Yeah. In the same way. Yeah. Like, I wonder how that affects someone's view of the franchise or even the first movie the first time they watch it.
I almost want to find somebody who has never seen it or never seen a Friday the 13th film and just like show it to them and go from there and see what they
Yeah,
say.
right. I don't know how easy that would be, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
So, we've been talking a lot about what we thought killer wise and stuff, but one of my favorite aspects of this movie, interestingly enough, is kind of about that in a way, is that we also do get to see Jason in the film ultimately at the end. That was the thing that was not originally in the script. It was a thing that Tom Savini had pitched of apparently having watched Carrie, he thought they needed like a stark jump scare type ending that would stay with the audience. And
Right.
one thing I will say about this film and the Friday films altogether that I've always enjoyed is I kind of like their semi surreal endings. They always
Right.
feel a little bit Lynchian, where you get a like moment like this where Jason jumps out of the water and
Right.
attacks Alice.
It's a very interesting setup because then like it's kind of funny because you can, as a filmmaker, you can kind of add that and it's kind of fun for your film, kind of fun for the audience. But then it's like when you move forward into a sequel, I mean, granted, they weren't thinking about sequels at that point. They were just like, let's get the movie done. When they go from the sequel, the director has to figure out, well, was it real? Was it not? I don't really know. The good thing about Jason, again, it's that open palette that you can like let yourself not be as strict to canon per se. So like the fact is they can kind of not confront it directly, but like so let it go, but do because obviously Jason does come back. The fact is he's not a boy anymore, and all of a sudden he's a current man. So I don't know what happened, but we accept it though because we like the film itself overall and the story of the individual film.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting thing.
It really is, and I've always loved it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, just because I think it does have a very surreal feel.
Yeah,
and it also kind of gives the entire context of the movie a more like surreal. Did it all happen? Did
right.
did some of it actually happen in her head? To your point, like, and is that the entire movie?
Right.
Like, because she's basically catatonic at that point. But what if all of it was just simply in her head? Like, if we had never had another Friday the 13th film, this would arguably be one of the most interesting to talk about because I don't know if we necessarily would have gotten an answer.
Right. It's like the inception of its time, man.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But in a $5,000 or $500,000 horror film, yeah,
Right, exactly.
But
probably wouldn't have the same social, probably have the same water cooler talk as the Inception film. But no, you're wrong. You're not wrong. I love the fact that they do it. It does add intrigue, does obviously spark the idea for the sequel that Jason's still out there, and Jason is obviously one of the most iconic characters in the history of especially horror, if not film in general. But yeah, I like that too. So I love the way the sheriff talks too. The line delivery is something I really wanted to point out. Something I really, really, really dug. When she asked about him, he's like, "Looks like, ma'am, we didn't find no boy out there." And we're like,
yeah,
"Oh shit." He's like, and then she has the like, "Oh, well then she's still out. He's still out there."
who's still out there? The
Right?
little boy,
Boy,
Jason.
Jason. Right.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's a great end. It makes for a great ending. It's much better than how it initially would have ended because that obviously would have been kind
With
of
her just on the lake, on the water. Yeah.
Right, just quick and abrupt, and that's it. So yeah, it's great. It's a great ending. So, anything else? Yeah. What's your favorite kill? Do you have a favorite kill? Maybe let's say besides the bacon one.
No, guys, come on. It's the best kill in the movie.
I know. That's why I wanted to make it interesting. Okay, what's your second favorite kill? Because we all like. I think everybody loves the bacon kill the best because that's the one that's the test of the time. Do you have a second one that you like, or not?
I honestly really like the Pamela murder.
Yeah.
I think that one is actually very cool. If you want to talk about that one, because a lot of the kills, actually, what's interesting is we usually see the aftermath in this movie comparative to some of the other ones versus the kills themselves.
Right. We get the aftermath a lot with the found body thing going on more than the actual like killing activity. Because they only do so much without being able to show the killer. Like later movies, you get to see Jason doing it as part of the draw of the franchise, but this time it's kind of like you can't see it because we don't know it. So
Like
I'll
the
agree.
reveal of all the dude pinned against the wall with the arrows is fantastic. Like
Yeah.
great practical effects and stuff. But again,
The axe on the head,
in the
great.
context of it, yeah, and of course, yeah, the throat cut too is fantastic. Again, a great effects work. But it's always going to be the bacon of it all. If we're going to really talk about
Yeah.
it just is. It's hard to look at it any other way. It's just
Yeah,
such
I
a
agree.
great kill.
I agree 100% there. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, no, but Betsy Palmer probably is the second one of the great swing headshot there. I love again the practical effects that they have of the head coming off. They mention it in the documentary how when you see Betsy's hands come up, they're obviously man hands. They're
Yeah.
like it's like the what's his name, Tom Savini's assistant. His hands, I'm kind of thinking they're all like got hairy knuckles and stuff. I know that's a funny thing that happens there.
Oh, it's very funny though.
But yeah, okay. Anything else about this movie that you want to talk about? Should we finish up? Should we wrap up?
I
Kind of
mean,
like said, there's more overall stuff than any indirect stuff.
yeah, so it's kind of interesting, to be honest. We were talking about this earlier, but like as far as the movie goes, I feel like there's a lot less to discuss about the mythology or the franchise as a whole, or as this film compared to the franchise as a whole out the gate, because this movie is so different than all the other ones. So I've actually had a lot of fun talking about the movie and its effects on the other movies around it, and the things that we could see it pulling from and things pulling from it, versus like I'm very excited once we start getting into part 2, part 3, as we start to really become the Jason films and you can dive into it more, because the truth is this is a stark murder mystery. There's not as much happening, like it's just kind of interesting. I will say, at the end of the day, we're very lucky that this movie exists. The fact that it still manages to have 10 kills is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But again,
more than I remember.
It's
kind of funny.
Yeah. But I like that 2 of them, 3 of them are like throats or axes to the head type things. But otherwise, like, what's not to like?
Kind of met some cool ways to do it. Absolutely. So, all right, then let's get to our rankings. Then we obviously rank a film on a scale of 1 to 11 here on PLD Projects. We always turn up to 11 here on PLD Projects. What do you rank this film first in our new season here, so to speak?
Interesting. I think I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I appreciate a lot of what it's doing in it. I'm not the world's like biggest fan of going back and rewatching this one comparative to some of the other ones. It's a very well made, very fun movie, but it's not a fun movie. Like I know I just said it is, but it's not a like Jason fun movie. And eventually the series becomes that for me as it goes, where I'm really just there for the Jason of it all, regardless of the rest.
Quite frankly, of all the films out there, the franchise, this is probably the least Friday the 13th film there is. And I guess you could argue that about Nightmare on Elm Street as well. The first one's a lot different tonally than the rest of them are. They kind of come back during New Nightmare a little bit. But as far as everything else goes, I mean, Michael Myers kind of sets the tone of his films. This is just a totally different kind of film. So I get what you mean about that. And it isn't as fun. I like everybody involved. I like the characters, the chemistry. There's some cool kills. I like the Betsy Palmer of it all overall. But at the end of the day, I'm going to give it a 6.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a 6. I think it's got some good building blocks. And I think I agree. It's like one of those things like I want to give it more just because of it. It's because of this film that we get to where we want to go, which is the starting block. But I can't lie and say that this is the one I want to go back and watch the most. Although, frankly, if I remember correctly, I'm not gonna. I don't want to put forward because I've ranked these before in my head, and of course, I try when we rewatch them, things change all the time. I think I like this more than like a couple of sequels, for sure. I think my least favorite's coming up soon. I'm not gonna lie, but beyond that, this one it will fit probably solidly right in the middle of the pack. So That's a fair
Yeah,
place
you know
for it.
what, man? I'll give you that. I think that's a totally fair assessment of it. I actually thought you'd go with like a 7, to be honest. I'm a little surprised to see it on the lower end.
Yeah, I actually you were a little higher than I thought it was going to be too. I thought you were going to go 6.5, maybe 7, but I'm glad you did. I'm actually glad you went 7.5. I'm happy to see it because I always
Yeah,
don't
well,
want to make it out sound like
I
don't
try
like
to
it.
also look at it as the bigger thing of it all, right? Like where it lands in the horror landscape, everything we're talking about, etc.
Right.
So 7.5 feels right, kind of where I would anticipate it being, just because of the cultural cachet and the beginning of it all.
I agree. I don't disagree on that at all. So it's hard. It's a hard one to judge as far as scoring that goes because unlike a lot of other films, especially even in the franchise, this does have that separate kind of score part of it attached to it because it's the original, because it sets everything in motion. But I'm trying to score it just on this film alone and watching this film alone and going from there. But it's all right.
Yep.
All right. Good work, my friend. We
Congrats.
got through the first film. Took a little bit of a break here and there, but we got through it. And next 2 weeks from now, we'll be talking about part 2, the intro to Jason and Baghead Jason, as we get to see.
Baghead Jason's the best.
Baghead Jason. We'll go from there.
We loved Baghead Jason in these parks.
But if this is your first time here, click that like, click that subscribe, leave us comments. We're always trying to increase our viewership and our little family here at PLD Projects. Of course, you're on the audio. You can leave us a review, ranking, so to speak. Give us 5 stars. It'd be awesome, if you like us. If you don't, leave us 5 stars anyway because I'm asking you to. I don't know. But if you do, nice. I know, aren't I? If you do like the channel, want to support even further, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Projects. So you have some great people. We have a great Facebook chat going. I have some great crew like Austin Cadell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Curran, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, and a bunch of others who I really can't thank you enough. You really help keep the lights on out there for PLD Projects. We really do appreciate every bit of what you do. And yeah, so PJ, where can the folks find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram at PJ_Campbell. You can also find me now on Substack at, I think it's just Substack/PJ Campbell. My link is up on Twitter too. I'm starting to write again. Mostly, just musings about movies and life and things like that. So I'm going to be doing a lot more of that over the coming days as I'm just trying to put myself out there again. I missed that drive. I wrote an entire piece about the Haunted Mansion and it's dealing with grief in the new film. And I'm one of the few people apparently who is on an island who not only just really liked the movie, but I actually found something within it that I found very fascinating and compelled to write about. So if you like that sort of thing, you guys know I like horror. I know, and I work, I love Disney and theme parks and stuff. It's a very fun piece. It came from a very specific place about my love for the park, the love for the attraction, love for the movie, and it all kind of coalesced into one place. So find that over there. You can sub for free, and if you're even feeling generous, there is a sub for money to help keep my own lights on, which is cool too. If you would decide to do that, you do not have to.
Absolutely, I'm very proud of you for doing this. I can't wait to start reading into this. I know I love your insights onto things, so bully to you. You can find me at @PlungeWordNewsU on Twitter, at PLD Projects on Twitter as well, and on Threads. Though I kind of forget Threads exist sometimes. I'm not quite in that groove, like checking that one all the time. Trying to get there. So hopefully I'll get there soon. I really could use a desktop version of Threads. That would help me out tremendously, to be completely honest. But then, of course, you always find me on all the PLD Projects channels. The Crown Jewels this week is going to take a day off because of my long trip. I wasn't able to record yesterday. So I'll have to go next week for Millionaire Waltz. You also find me every week. Tomorrow we have Holy Snokes, a Star Wars podcast, myself and Maddie Gunner, talking about 5 essential Ahsoka arcs as we move forward closer and closer to the Ahsoka show. You can find me with Lego every 2 weeks as well, doing review. I'm going to read episode 3 of the first season, or the only season of the 1985 show, 84-85 show. The Harrisons has debuted, so take a look at the first episode there. Second episode forthcoming probably by the end of the month. And that should cover us for the most part. I think I'm not forgetting anything. If I am, it's all here on PLD Projects. So take a look and see what you can find. All right, folks, that'll be it for this week. Until next week, stay mediocre, my friends. Never underestimate the power that is mediocrity.
Peace
Bye
out.
now.